Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Happy Memorial Day. My name is Marshall Gimple. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a light-skinned man, older man, with a beard on my face, not much hair on the top of my head, and I'm wearing glasses. Today I have on a dark blue suit, a light blue shirt, and a red, white, and blue pattern tie in honor of Memorial Day. So welcome to First Unitarian Church, where our mission is to explore the eternal, nurture community, and pursue the common good. We welcome you in your brokenness and in your wholeness. No matter who you have been, who you are, or who you are becoming, we greet you today with love. I'd like to extend a special welcome to everyone who is watching us on YouTube today. During the prelude, please introduce yourself in the comments and let us know where you're joining us from. If you're in Oklahoma City, what neighborhood? If you're elsewhere, what town or city are you in? Before we begin our service, I have a few announcements. First, a reminder that next Sunday, immediately after the service, we will hold our annual congregational meeting. As Unitarian Universalists, one of our core principles is the use of the democratic process, both in our congregations and in society at large. Participation in the meeting, where we elect congregational leaders and approve the budget for the next church year, is an important right and responsibility of membership in our community. Active members will be able to cast their votes in person, by proxy, or via Zoom. You can find the Zoom link, the meeting agenda, and more information in the weekly newsletter. As we end the formal church year and transition into summer, you'll notice some changes in our worship service. Our choir director, Ebuka Eziakaka, won't be with us for the next several weeks because he is in training with the National Guard. We look forward to seeing him again in the fall. As is the custom here at First Unitarian, during the summer months, our wonderful choir will also be taking a break. But before they do, I would like you to join me in thanking them for a wonderful season of music. Finally, I am very happy to welcome Stephen Elkins Kennedy as our new accompanist. Stephen is a well-known and respected vocal coach and accompanist for musical theater throughout Oklahoma City. And Stephen, we are so glad to have you here with us. And now, the prelude prepares us for worship.
Again, welcome. I'm Reverend Diana Davies. My pronouns are she, her. And in a spirit of inclusion, for those who are joining us today who have a visual impairment, I am wearing my clergy stole that was sewn by our own silver for my installation several years ago now. Every Sunday, along with hundreds of churches and fellowships and emerging communities all around the world, Unitarian Universalists light a chalice as a symbol of our faith. It was Unitarians risking their lives to help Jews and dissidents escape Nazi oppression in Europe who merged ancient symbols of the chalice and the flame to represent love and commitment. This image became the official symbol of the Unitarian Service Committee and later of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Every single week then, before we sing our first hymn, before we pray or meditate, before we hear the sermon, before we drink coffee, we begin by remembering. We remember that at the core of what we do, behind the music, behind the challenging and uplifting words, behind the community and education and social justice and caring, there is a commitment to liberation. Yours, mine, everyone's. Here at First Unitarian, we say these words as we light our chalice. We light the chalice as a symbol of our sacred time together. The burning chalice represents the light of reason and science, the warmth of loving community, the cleansing heat of justice, and the flame of hope. A more recent addition to the lighting of the chalice in many UU communities is the land acknowledgement. We light our chalice here in our building in Midtown Oklahoma City on land that was home to indigenous peoples, including the Apache, Caddo, and Wichita, and land that was taken from the Muskogee and Seminole and other removed and relocated peoples. We say these words also as a way of remembering. We say them to remember that before the forced removal and forced assimilation, indigenous people were here on this land, and they had their own unique cultures and languages. We say these words to acknowledge that First Americans are still here, and that remembrance alone is not enough. Remembrance is a place to start, but it must be followed by true relationship. And over time, with committed work, it might even lead to repair. So each week, we light our chalice, we acknowledge those who came before us, we remember, and we start again and again. We start again. Please rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn. We're in the teal softbound hymnal today. It's number 1017, Building a New Way. We'll sing all 4 verses.
I use a religious lens when I do charitable and social justice work. And I do this quite consciously and deliberately. And I borrow from a wide variety of faith traditions, but I'll just give you a few examples. So, for example, I may apply the idea of tzedakah from Judaism. This is a term which means charity justice, a concept that doesn't really exist in our American culture. It defines the act of giving and of ensuring everyone has the basics of life as both a moral obligation and a legal one. It is both an individual and a communal activity, one which is deeply rooted in covenant and which meshes the judicial requirement to provide the basics of life with the joy of giving and helping. It asserts that the act of giving is so important that even the recipients of aid must be given enough so that they too can participate in acts of charity. Similarly, I might tap into the Buddhist notion of deep-seated compassion. Buddhists view compassion, along with the qualities of love, joy, and equanimity, as fundamental aspects of living a life which is designed to alleviate suffering in oneself and in others. Buddhism also teaches that compassion and empathy are disciplines that require practice, that they can be nurtured, developed, and deepened over time until they can encompass all beings. Now, of course, I usually try to incorporate UU principles into my approach and my lens, if you will, especially the first and seventh principles, the inherent worth and dignity of every person, and respect for the interdependent of the web of life of which we all are a part. In addition, I think the UU culture, perhaps more than any other faith tradition, emphasizes the spiritual imperative to act on our beliefs and principles. I read a phrase a number of years ago, and even though the author is by no stretch a UU, the author was Ayn Rand, she said this: "Thought without action is a sin. Thought without action is a sin." I think that could be the UU motto. My term for this approach or this emphasis is the urgency of the now, because I think that UUism tells us that action is always needed in the world, and that the only window we have in which to act is the present, the now, right now. Okay, so why do I have this deliberate process? Well, it isn't because I'm extremely religious. It certainly isn't because I am filled with compassion and empathy. In fact, I use this process because I am not filled with those qualities. I was not born with an abundance of either. And as I grew to be a teenager, I began to realize that I didn't respond to certain events the way my friends did. I didn't look at things the way they did. Now, there were other aspects of my unique personality that entered into the equation, but the lack of empathy was certainly notable. I considered it to be a type of birth defect, a condition to be managed, but which could not be corrected. I did develop early in life a strong sense of justice and injustice, of equity and inequity. But that's not the same thing as having compassion and empathy, is it? Someone who possesses those former qualities without the latter can often be perceived as being arrogant, aloof, stern, unyielding, zealous, driven, and unfeeling. I suppose I have been perceived to be, and have been, all these things at one time or another. But I find that if I can employ a way to change my perspective, then I can change this dynamic. When it comes to social justice work, I can use a religious lens to change my vantage point. I liken it to someone who is colorblind, but when they put on special glasses, suddenly they can see a world filled with the colors of the rainbow. The religious lens enables me to interact with the world differently and to engage faculties that I otherwise would repress or ignore. Consequently, I can become a little softer in my attitude, a little more open with others, as well as more accepting and less critical. I can become, in a sense, more fully human. Now, I know that most of you, to include those of you who are my role models in this social justice work, have no need of such machinations. You are naturally, gloriously generous and compassionate. Empathy and nurturing are part of your very essence. So I ask that you give me some space and some grace. If I seem to come at an issue from a different angle, or ask a question that is a bit jarring, or come across as uncaring, that's my reflex response kicking in. But if you give me a little time, you might notice my demeanor shifting as I put on those glasses with a religious lens in them. They don't always work, but at least you'll know I'm trying to engage my heart, even as my mind is dismissive of the effort.
Good morning. My name is Susan Bishop, and I am the facilitator for the Social Justice Council. Every Sunday, we take an offering. Since 2002, all the cash and designated checks from that offering have gone directly to external nonprofit organizations doing good work. They are our Change for Change partners. For the month of May, our Change for Change partner is Thick Descriptions, and I want to point out this is our last Sunday in May. So this will be the last Sunday that we talk about Thick Descriptions for now. They partner with educational institutions and community organizations to teach the skills needed to build healthier and more sustainable communities. For those of you who are in the sanctuary with us today, in just a moment we'll be passing the offering plate. If you're not able to make a gift today, we invite you to write a note of encouragement to our Change for Change partner organization, and we will share those messages with them as well. And if you're watching us online, please make your gift by sending a check to First Unitarian Church. Just write Change for Change on the memo line, or make an online payment through our website, oneuc.org. Thank you.
Tomorrow is Memorial Day, and in honor of this sacred day, I'd like to share a poem by Yusuf Kumunyaka called Facing It. Yusuf Kumunyaka was born in Louisiana. He served in the Vietnam War as a correspondent. This poem is about a visit that he made to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And in it, he faces the trauma of that war as it intersects with the trauma of racism. My black face fades, hiding inside the black granite. I said I wouldn't, damn it. No tears. I'm stone. I'm flesh. My clouded reflection eyes me like a bird of prey, the profile of night slanted against morning. I turn this way, the stone lets me go. I turn that way, I'm inside the Vietnam Veterans Memorial again, depending on the light to make a difference. I go down the 58,022 names, half expecting to find my own in letters like smoke. I touch the name Andrew Johnson. I see the booby trap's white flash. Names shimmer on a woman's blouse, but when she walks away, the names stay on the wall. Brushstrokes flash, a red bird's wings cutting across my stare. The sky, a plane in the sky. A white vet's image floats closer to me, and then his pale eyes look through mine. I'm a window. He's lost his right arm inside the stone. In the black mirror, a woman's trying to erase names. No, she's brushing a boy's hair. On this Memorial Day weekend, we remember those who have died while serving the U.S. military. The Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America organization asked everyone to pause in silent remembrance for 1 minute at 3 o'clock on Memorial Day. So let's do that now as well. Please join me in 1 minute of silent reflection, remembering those who have given the ultimate sacrifice for their country. On this Memorial Day weekend and always, may we not only honor our fallen, but may we do our part in healing the wounds of war, in fighting to ensure that physically, mentally, and spiritually wounded veterans receive the health care, psychological care, and loving kindness they so deserve. May each one of us do all we can to achieve a just and lasting peace, not only among all nations, but among ourselves. As we speak of peace and justice, may we also remember that it was on Memorial Day, just 3 years ago, that George Floyd was murdered. A Minneapolis police officer pressed his knee on the back of Floyd's neck for more than 9 minutes, refusing to let up, even when the human being trapped beneath him gasped, "I can't breathe," not just once, but more than 20 times. Floyd's death was supposed to be a wake-up call, but since that time, Black people continue to be killed by police at a rate that is almost 3 times higher than white people. And the overall number of these deaths has continued to climb. So on this Memorial Day, we say the name of George Floyd. We say the name of Tyree Nichols. We remember these and so many others who have been the victims of racism and a deeply unjust system that hurts those it is duty-bound to protect. May all who struggle find strength. May all those who mourn know peace. May we never cease in striving for that day when violence is recognized as the problem and not the answer. May it be so. For Christians, this is Pentecost Sunday, the 7th Sunday after Easter. Pentecost is a celebration of an event in the Christian scriptures that happens after the death and resurrection of Jesus. And this event is described in the book of Acts. Jesus returns to his apostles, spends several days with them, and then ascends into the heavens. And as Jesus' followers watch him ascending, a couple of angels appear and, paraphrasing here, say, "What are you looking at? What are you doing staring at the sky? There's work to be done." And so the apostles get to work. First, they find a replacement for Judas, which they do, oddly enough, by throwing dice. And then they go to Jerusalem to celebrate the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, which is the time when Jews celebrate the receiving of the Torah from God. Shavuot is one of those 3 times when Jews were required to make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, so the place would have been packed. And that's how it's described in the book of Acts, with Jewish people gathered from every nation, from Mesopotamia and Egypt, Rome, Crete, Arabia, Cappadocia, Judea, Libya, different parts of Asia. And suddenly, there was a loud whoosh sound, and over the head of each apostle, a tongue of fire appears. And the apostles begin speaking in different languages. But that's not the real miracle in this story. The miracle is that there are only 12 apostles. And among the crowds gathered in Jerusalem, there are many more than 12 languages spoken. And yet everyone hears the apostles speaking in their own native language. The apostles aren't multilingual. They're working class guys from the sticks. They haven't been practicing on Duolingo. Traditional Christians would say that they're understood because they are inspired, filled with the Holy Spirit. A more modern perspective might say that they are able to move others, even across cultures and languages, because they are speaking from their hearts, from their most deeply held religious convictions. Now, the text doesn't tell us what those men said or what the multilingual crowd heard. We can only glean that their words were true and powerful, and that the people gathered there heard them as if through the ears of the heart. And this leads to a question, albeit a rhetorical and maybe slightly silly one. If we, modern-day Unitarian Universalists, could be transported into this scenario, could be there among the multilingual crowd, what would we hear? Would we be moved by inspired words, or would we be skeptical? Because the reality is that for many religious liberals, fiery speech based on religious conviction is suspicious. It's how they talk. The evangelicals, the Christian nationalists, those who have contaminated the public sphere and our structures of democratic governance with illogical, some might say crazy, religious rhetoric. Many UUs and other religious liberals feel that prophetic speech crosses a sacred line between the private and the public, between the spiritual and the political. And this works both ways. There is a sense that religion, as something profoundly private, should have no role in the public realm. And likewise, that politics has no place in religious life. And those that cross the line have sometimes paid the price. Rachel Shrubas is an ordained Presbyterian minister in Tucson, Arizona. And in her essay, Confessions of a Preacher in the Borderlands, she talks about a time back in 2010 when then Governor Jan Brewer signed into law Senate Bill 1070, which required law enforcement officers to determine the immigration status of any person where, quote, reasonable suspicion exists that the person is an alien. Now, many people recognize the law as legally sanctioned racism, and a group of Presbyterian leaders gathered to draft a motion against it. Now, many spoke out with passion, but Reverend Shrubas argued they needed more time and more education before they could make any kind of formal statement. It felt like a logical stance to take, but there was something else going on. I was afraid of losing my job, she later admitted. Even though most members of her congregation identified as moderate to progressive on the political spectrum, there were some who could not tolerate what they saw as religious politics or political religion. So Reverend Shrubas held back until eventually she felt compelled to speak out from the pulpit. She delivered a sermon, which she later described as the sermon that shall forever live in infamy, in which she spoke prophetically against the sanctioned racism of the Arizona law. And in response, a dozen congregants proceeded to stage a walkout over brunch. Those 12 people amounted to about 10% of the congregation. She writes, quote, once occupied seats in the church's intimate sanctuary sat glaringly empty. Close friends of those who had left the church struggled with divided loyalties, unquote. Now, eventually, new members would join, and new lay leadership would emerge, and the congregation would become a model for immigration justice. But for a while, it was a very difficult time. So what the heck was going on? Hers was not a conservative church, so why the backlash? Well, ironically, part of the problem might have been that her congregants were specifically religious liberals. Let me explain what I mean by this. Our Unitarian and Universalist ancestors back in the late 18th and early 19th centuries were pioneers of religious liberalism within Christianity. Today, many Protestant denominations can be described as liberal or progressive. The United Church of Christ, most certainly, but also many Methodists, Presbyterians, Lutherans, Episcopalians, and others. Beyond Christianity, we find religious liberalism in Reform Judaism, and strange as this might sound, in conservative Judaism. In fact, most American Jews are religious liberals. There are also liberal Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists. And even faiths that maintain a conservative doctrine may be dominated by individual members who themselves are religious liberals. Catholicism is the most vivid example of this. So, what is religious liberalism? Unitarian Universalist theologian James Luther Adams described it like this: it is faith that is oriented toward the present or the future rather than the past. It is faith that doesn't resist modern knowledge, including science or lived experience, but grows and evolves along with the changing times. Religious liberalism is committed to free religious inquiry and recognizes that there are many paths to meaning. As such, it celebrates religious pluralism, and it recognizes that truth is not sealed. Truth is not contained with any single scripture or doctrine. Other key values of religious liberals include the idea that everything is interconnected, that we all are one, that every voice and every person matters, and that because these things are true, we are obligated to lift every voice and to work for the liberation of every person. Now, many of these core principles map beautifully onto the basic ideas of democracy. On the surface, it seems that the two should work together for ever greater freedom and equality at the local and national levels and in our wider world. But that's not what we're seeing. It's not religious liberalism and democracy building each other up and leading us to a better future. The connection between religion and politics instead is manifested in the Christian nationalism that has taken over Oklahoma and is on the rise in the rest of the country. We find it also in Jewish fundamentalism in Israel, in the Hindu nationalism of the BJP, the dominant party in India, and in Myanmar, where militant Buddhists lash out against the Muslim Rohingya minority. There is no major religion that doesn't have some version of the Golden Rule. There's no major religion that doesn't promote the values of truth and justice and compassion and kindness. But when the desire for religious freedom is usurped by the drive for religious power, all these values are forgotten, or they're compartmentalized. Not truth, but my truth. Not justice, but my justice. Compassion and kindness, maybe, but only for me and mine. So, where are the religious liberals in all of this? Why is our righteous outrage not as loud as a tornado or as hot as fire? Unitarian Universalist scholar Paul Reiser addresses this very issue in his book, Reclaiming Prophetic Witness. He lists several reasons why many religious liberals are reluctant to speak with prophetic voice, a voice that comes from our deepest and most profound religious convictions. First, he mentions the tendency that I mentioned before, in which many religious liberals find fiery, spirit-filled speech to be somehow suspicious. This quality is based in our 18th century opposition to the over-the-top fire and brimstone preaching that was known as the Great Awakening. Maybe nothing sums up this difference so much as the titles of two sermons from the early 1740s. The quintessential sermon of the Great Awakening was Jonathan Edwards' "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God." Contrast this to one of the best-known religious liberal sermons of the same era, Charles Chauncey's "Enthusiasm Described and Cautioned Against." Suffice it to say, our tradition has had a fear of being too emotional. And then we also don't want to seem too religious. There's a good reason for this, of course, including the fact that contemporary media has, by and large, equated the word religious with the far right. It also makes perfect sense that we want to distance ourselves from the nationalists and white supremacists who use religion as a cudgel to bash the lives of 2S LGBTQIA people, black people, poor people, and really any people who don't fit neatly into their definition of the superior and the saved. Now, some of our strengths can become weaknesses when it comes to speaking out against injustice with a prophetic voice. Our belief in pluralism can lead us down a rabbit hole of wondering, oh, who am I anyway to speak on behalf of anyone else or to say that something isn't moral? And our belief that truth is always unfolding can lead us to get caught in endless loops of studying and talking things to death before we feel confident enough to act. Besides worrying about being too emotional and too religious, many religious liberals fear they might be too political. This fear is based in a misunderstanding of the separation of church and state, and it leads to a radical disconnect between civic and religious life. Instead of insisting that multiple religious voices, including atheist voices, be heard in dialogue, leading to greater creativity and resilience in our systems of governance, too many of us worry about any interaction between religion and politics. When we speak in public, we may self-censor and attempt to remain neutral and end up inspiring no one. And in our churches, we build little apolitical bubbles, trying to isolate ourselves from the pain and discomfort of the larger world, forgetting that spiritual and social liberation cannot be disconnected. We Unitarian Universalists, we religious liberals, have a healing message. We have a saving message. It is a message of equity, of interconnection, of the primacy of relationship over doctrine. It is a message about a truth that is ever evolving, about a mystery of life that is change. It says we already have everything we need to build peace and freedom and justice. It says no one is lost, ever. It aspires not just for a level playing field, but for a level victory in which everybody gets free. Our message affirms that no being is born evil, that our essence is ultimately good, because it is ultimately love itself. This is a message that is accessible to all, that bears meaning for all. And if we speak it with commitment, with emotion, with spirit, both in church and in the courthouse, from the pulpit and from the public square, in the quietness of prayer and meditation, and in the loudness of political debate, it will be heard. There is a time to stand and look up at the sky, and there is a time to get moving and to speak with prophetic fire. This is that time. Would you please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn, number 1024, When the Spirit Says Do. And Becky, we're going to sing.
Sing, dance, shout.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, we're going to do 4 verses. The first one is do, then the next are sing, dance, and shout, and you can follow me. You'll see it down at the bottom, but we got it. Do when the Spirit says do. You got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you got to do, oh Lord. You got to do when the Spirit says
Spirit says sing, 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 Spirit says sing. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. When the Spirit says dance, you got to dance, oh Lord. You got to dance when the Spirit says dance. Spirit says dance, 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 Spirit says dance. You got to shout when the Spirit says shout. You got to shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you got to shout, oh Lord. You got to shout when the Spirit says shout. Spirit says shout, 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 Spirit says shout.
We extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of love and community which burns in our hearts.
Next month is June, is Pride Month. And so First Unitarian, we have created our very own First U Pride shirts. And you can purchase yours, you can order one in Daniel Hall immediately after the service. You can see Lynn Ann Wagner. You want to wave when I say your name? Lynn Ann Wagner, Todd Hildebrandt, or Loriana Lee Knapp. In Daniel Hall to order your shirt. You can also find a link to order online if you'd prefer to do that. I leave you with this blessing from Reverend Bill Sinkford, a previous president of the Unitarian Universalist Association. There is so much work to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history and find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. This is our dream. May it be so.
Amen.